Today we are going to be looking at graphing on the coordinate plane. So let's take a look at a coordinate plane. I've got one drawn up here, and so let's define some of the components of this coordinate plane. First of all, a coordinate plane is broken into two different axes. So we've got it in four quadrants here. We've got four different parts, and the axes make those four parts. Well, the vertical axis we call the y-axis. And so the y-axis represents all values going up and down. And so this would be the positive y-axis up here. So I'll put the plus y over here. This down here would be the negative y-axis because the numbers below the x-axis, or that horizontal axis, are going to be negative. The numbers above are going to be positive. Well, if that's the case, I already mentioned it, but this is our x-axis. And the x-axis, again, to the right of the y-axis is positive numbers. To the left is going to be negative numbers. Well, this point right in the middle between where the two axes meet is called the origin. The origin just represents like the beginning, and that's what this represents as well. It's kind of where you begin when you try to figure out where points are when you plot ordered pairs. And I already mentioned quadrants, how we take a coordinate plane, and with these axes we break it into four different components, or four different quadrants. And this one up here would be called the first quadrant. So we'll call it quadrant 1. And typically they use Roman numerals to represent that. And this would be quadrant 2. And then making the C again, that's the way people remember it. If we go this way, we start in quadrant 1, we make it down to quadrant 2, and then into quadrant 3. And then we have our last quadrant, and that is quadrant 4. That's where we finish off the C. So if you remember how to make a C, and that will tell you, or help you recall which quadrant is which. And since you start the C in the upper right-hand corner, that's quadrant 1. And if you finish the C in the lower right-hand corner, that's quadrant 4. That's what we have down here. Well, that's the components of the coordinate plane. And now we want to plot things on a coordinate plane. And we plot things called ordered pairs. And they're called ordered because they go in alphabetical order here, x and then y. And the x tells us to move left if it's negative. So if we have a negative number, we're going to move left, and we're going to move right if we have a positive number. We're going to move that number of spaces. Where the y component tells us to move up if it's positive. So if it's a positive number, we're going to go up. And if we go down, then it would have to be a negative number. So we're going to use that concept to graph some points, and that's what it's asking us to do on this next problem. Here it says an air traffic controller is at 0, 0. So they're at the origin. So where the graph begins, that would be right at this point right here, 0, 0. And so what they're asking us to do is they're saying, well, airplane A is at 4, 3. 4 represents 4 miles east and 3 miles north of her location. So here is the air traffic controller. So 4 miles to the east, so we go 4 miles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to end up going up 3 miles because we're going to the north. North is on the positive y-axis. So again, I'm over 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go up 3, so I go up 1, 2, 3. And that would give me a point. So you can't really see these dashes here, but I'll try to put some in. So I went over 4 spaces, and then I went up 3, and that is where airplane A is located. And then she spots airplane B at -3, -2. So -3 would be 3 miles to the west. So over 1, 2, and 3. So 3 miles to the west, and then 2 miles south because it was a -2. So I go 1, 2 down, and that's where B would be. And then we have one more, and airplane C is at 5.5 miles, and then to the east, and then 2 miles down, which would be -2 would be represent to the south. And so 5 miles over, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But since I'm going over a half mile, it's in between the 5 and the 6. So here's 5, here's 6. If I'm going to 5.5, I'm right in between those two. And then I have to go down 2. So down 1, 2, and that would be my point right there, right in between 5 and 6, but then down 2. And so that is airplane C. So now we've graphed each of those locations. So let's take a look at the last section, and it asks us to find some distances between some points. So find the distance between each pair of points from A and B, so between A and B. So as we look at it, notice the coordinates are numbered 2, 4, 6, 8. So there's 1 would be in between 0 and 2. So one way to do it is to count the spaces. So we just count the spaces down, we have, and then we count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we know it's 10 units. I'm going to just write down 10 units there. And we've got 10 units. I know it's 10 units, but let's come up with it another way, because sometimes the numbers are so far apart we couldn't really count them very easily. So let's go ahead and take the ordered pairs. This one is -6, 6. So -6, 6. So the x value was -6, the y value is +6. And then B is over 6 spaces to the left, so -6, but it's down this time 4 spaces, so -4. So another way we can do it, we want to find the distance between A and B. So what we're going to look at are these two numbers, the y components. And if I want to find the distance between, when I want to find between numbers, actually I'm going to write down the word distance as well. Distance between, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to subtract. We'll say then subtract. If I want to find out like the difference between numbers, I would subtract the two numbers. And I could do the same thing here. 6 minus -4. Well, when I take away -4, that's the same thing as adding positives. So that makes 10 units as well. So that's another way you could come up with the answer. So A to C, let's try that method of doing the subtraction, then we'll count the spaces next. So it looks like A is at -6, 6. We saw that from last time. C is at 8 over and 6 up. So 8 to the right and then 6 up. So now we want to look at the distance between. We're going to look at the x values, not the y values this time, because the y values are the same. So the distance between would be -6 take away 8. Well, that's the same thing as -6 add -8. So that would be -14. But really what I want is the distance. Whenever I want distance, all we really are caring about is the distance between that number and 0. So really I want the absolute value of -14, which is just 14 units. So 14 units, that would be the distance between the two numbers. Let's see if that matches what I'd get if I went ahead and counted the spaces by 2s. So I'm going to have to go down here because I can't really see my horizontal or vertical numbers or chart very well. So I'm going to go from here. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and it matches. So 14 units would be the distance between A and C. These are the types of problems you'll see on tonight's homework. Good luck.